In this video, we're going to show you what you need to know about the pin grabber. We're joined by Dave, who will first explain how the process works and the components that make up the pin grabber. Then we'll jump into the cab for a demonstration. And finally, we'll go over some additional tips and tricks. Remember to always reference the machine's manual. In addition to the manual, there are numerous warning labels and information available on the machine that needs to be read and understood. So let's get started on an explanation on how the pin grabber works.
Hello, my name is Dave Lariviere. I'll be walking you through how to install and remove a pin grabber coupler from a bucket. With regards to the operation of the pin grabber, the wedge in the back of the bucket holding this pin here is going to first be actuated to release the pin. Then what's going to happen is you're going to roll the quick coupler up to determine whether that's been detached. Once that's done and decided it's ready to go to the next step, you're going to ensure that the bucket is on the ground in roughly the level position or the position that's going to not cause the bucket to rock or maneuver. Then the next thing you're going to do is actuate the second switch. You're going to hear some higher frequency beeps, which means that the lock right here is now fully retracted and you can release the coupler from the bucket completely now. You're going to move over into another position, most likely to grab another attachment or another bucket of sorts, and you're going to reverse that process. With regards to reversing the process with the pin grabber coupler, you're going to take that secondary switch, actuate it again, listen for the high frequency beeps. This lock right here is going to roll up out of the way. You have 10 seconds at that point, so you need to be already positioned over the second attachment, the other attachment you're going to roll into, because the 10-second window is real. Rolling the coupler over the secondary pin and reversing the switch to now close this lock will put you in a position where you're now locked into the bucket, and you can now roll the coupler forward and into the lock position. Reversing the first switch with the orange button will now lock the knife edge into the other pin. Your bucket is now affixed to the machine. When reinstalling the coupler into the bucket, it is imperative that the lock in the front is installed first. This is the only way that the coupler can be installed properly into the bucket.
Now that we know the components that make up the pin grabber and how the process works, let's jump into the machine for a demonstration.
We will now be removing the coupler from the bucket. After entering the cab, you want to initially ensure your seatbelt is in place. You will push down the operation lever and ensure the idle is turned right down so that for smooth operation. Okay, so what we'll be doing is initially actuating the forward switch with the orange tab on it, locking tab. It is a detent switch and it will rock to the right to initially unlock the rear wedge. You will now hear a slow beeping. That is now causing the wedge to retract away from the bucket. What you're going to do now is roll the quick coupler rear out of the bucket by actuating the right joystick to the right. You will now place the bucket just lightly on the ground, and you will actuate the second rocker switch, causing the lock to now retract and release the front pin. You do have a 10-second window to remove the lock from the bucket. What you will hear is a higher frequency beeping And after 3 to 4 beeps, you have 10 seconds to remove. Okay. Now reversing the action and reinstalling a bucket, you will now see that the lock is protruding, which is not the position you want to be in for installing the bucket. We will now position the coupler without forcing the lock onto the pin, just positioning the coupler. We'll now actuate the rear switch, causing the high frequency to come back on, and roll into the coupler. You'll now see the lock pop back out. In this position, no digging or forcing on the bucket should be done. Damage to the lock pin and the pin itself in the bucket could happen. Before moving the bucket into other positions, ensure that that lock is in place. You will see it from the cab. It is a red tab pointed right at the cab. Reposition the bucket on the ground. Roll the wedge into place to collect the second pin. Once the pin grabber is in place, the forward switch will be turned off to the left. The beeping will stop, meaning the wedge is now coming into contact with the pin if it has been positioned correctly. You will now pick up the bucket, roll it completely up into place. This is causing high pressure to the wedge itself and locking it into the pins. You'll position the bucket back on the ground, turn the idle down, and you will be getting out of the cab to check whether the lock and the wedge in the back of the bucket are fully engaged. In this case, it is. Another pointer with regards to locking the pin grabber onto a bucket is that you want to ensure that the knife edge wedge in the back is fully retracted before you roll the pin grabber into this first pin. Not doing that could cause possible damage to the cylinder or hydraulic hoses. And it could also repeatedly could cause damage to both the knife edge wedge or the pin itself.
It's that simple. Always make sure you visually inspect and verify that your bucket is properly attached. Now that we know how to remove and install attachments with the pin grabber, let's go over a great feature with this pin grabber.
For normal operation, you'll obviously have the bucket pointed at the cab. This position here locks into the pin closest to the cab, and the wedge will lock into the other. With a pin grabber, operation of the bucket in reverse is an option. You can install the bucket or attachment in reverse and utilize it as needed. Now you can scrape up the wall, just like a shovel in a mining pit. This is frequently used on slightly larger machines and deep hole jobs.
To ensure smooth operation of the pin grabber, don't forget to properly grease it.
Something else that should be completed at the end of every shift is the greasing of these 2 points on each side of the coupler. Along with these 2 grease nipples, there is also a third grease nipple located on the bottom of the coupler. You'll roll out of the coupler and have to grease it at that point. It cannot be greased well attached to a bucket. This should be greased at least once a day, once a shift. These grease points are greasing the face of the wedge pin itself, which will make for smooth, easy operation throughout its life.
Once again, remember to always refer to the machine's manual, and for all your heavy equipment rental needs, visit us at rentone.ca.
And thank you for allowing us the time to show you how to remove and install a pin grabber coupler from an attachment.